All right, well, thank you all for joining us. Good afternoon from Arlington, Texas. We'd like to thank those of us who are joining here in the room today on the campus of UTA. We'd also like to welcome all of our participants who are watching and following along with us on Twitter across the various continents. So good day and good evening to everybody as well. The panel we've assembled today to help us better understand and continue discussions here at UTA on the theme of underrepresented learners is one that's already been active in our new Link Lab initiative on campus, but brings a wealth of experience to this issue of underrepresented learners and how we as a university that increasingly is asking, where is the learning, or where is the learning in online classwork? Where is the learning for all learners is a way that we are increasingly asking and rephrasing that question so that we make sure that the technology and tools and learning data that we have benefits everyone who comes to us at UTA. And as researchers, of course, we ask those questions in hopes that learners throughout higher education can benefit from the work as well. Let me quickly introduce our three speakers. We'll then turn it over to the panel, and we'll come back for questions afterwards. For those who are following at a distance, on Twitter, we're at hashtag UTALink, UTALINK. You can also submit questions if you are a distant viewer or listener through that hashtag, and we'll bring those to the question session at the end of the panel as well. On my far right, your far left, is Dr. Taryn Ozuna. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies here at UTA. She earned her doctorate in higher education administration with a concentration in Mexican American studies from the University of Texas at Austin. You're going to see an Austin trend here today. Her research focuses on the educational experiences of Latino students as they access, transition, and persist in minority-serving institutions, HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, and HSIs, of which we have recently become one, Hispanic-serving institutions. To her left, your right, is Dr. I have to do my directions, Dr. Maria Martinez-Cosio, who is an associate professor in the School of Urban and Public Affairs. And her second role, from which I have gotten to know her wonderfully over the past year, is working as an assistant vice provost for faculty development here at UT Arlington. Her doctorate is in sociology from the University of California at San Diego, and her research interests span several disciplines, including education, planning, and sociology. To her left, my immediate right, is Dr. Holly Hungerford-Kresser. She's an associate professor of English education and literacy studies here at the University of Texas at Arlington, and she earned her doctorate from, you guessed it, the University of Texas at Austin.
Not UCSD?
Not from the University of California. From the University of Texas at Austin in curriculum and instruction with an emphasis in literary studies. Her research focuses primarily on college and career readiness, especially as regards first-generation college students and pre-service teacher education. So with that, I'm going to turn our first presentation segment over to the panel, and as I said, we'll work with questions and start discussions when they're done with their basic presentation. So please, thank you for joining us today.
So let me get started, and I'm not sure if you all had a chance to look at U.S. World and News report from yesterday, but the title of one of their programs, Holly's going to help me with the slides, is College of Tomorrow, the Changing Demographic of the Student Body. Part of what we argue here is that this College of Tomorrow is here today, and we're experiencing that here at UT Arlington. This changing demographic pushes us away from these traditional 18-year-old white male student who went to school full-time, maybe worked part-time on campus, to a future where we have underrepresented learners here on campus who are largely ethnically and racially diverse. They're older. They're juggling work and family, often working full-time and juggling home life plus school. They're also adults that are heading back to school after maybe being out of school for a year or two, or in our case, many are transferring here from community colleges. So they're not your typical 18-year-old. This future that U.S. World News talks about in this article, for us, is what's happening today. So let me tell you a little more about UT Arlington. So we're a 21st century urban research university located in the 4th largest metro area in the United States. That means that we have a large Hispanic population that's here that's coming to our campus that we don't have to go out and recruit for. This fall enrollment hit a record 35,000 students. We're second to UT Austin in terms of enrollment. And that's a 65% increase from fall of since 2001. And we've broken that enrollment record just about every fall. We're the 7th fastest growing public research university in 2013, and we're the 5th most diverse in the United States. Now, one of the data, I guess part of the data that I want to share with you is our transfer students, because to me, that's really an indication of what this future population of students looks like. So our transfers comprise about 34% of our student population, our transfer students, many from community colleges. And they are 30% of those transfer students are Hispanic. Another 30% are the first in their families to attend college. Okay? 70% of them work more than 20 hours per week. And 43% of these transfer students take at least one long semester off due to financial or family obligations. So there are interruptions in their education. So for us, they sort of present challenges as to how do we respond to their changing needs. Very different, again, than the traditional 18-year-old white male student population that we saw when I went to school. Not to date myself, right? But you guys get the idea. So UT Arlington as an HSI, we hit that threshold of 25% Hispanic students that allowed us to apply for the designation as an HSI, and I'll explain in a bit what that means. 15% of our students are African American, 40% are white, 12% are Asian. 18% complete their undergrad degree in 4 years. 18%, and that's not out of the norm for many public urban research universities. 44% completed in 6 years. So our students are persistent, right? They want to get that degree and they understand the value of it. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of challenges that they face. And one of those big challenges is financial aid. 56% of the entering 2013-14 class borrowed to pay for their education. Okay? And my guess is that number is probably higher, but this is what our data captures. So we received the designation as a Hispanic serving institution last May. We applied for the designation in April and received it in May. So what does that mean? For us is that it opens the door to additional federal funding to serve this changing demographic. One of the myths, though, of becoming an HSI that I want to address is that an HSI designation allows for funding that only benefits Latino students. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the federal program specified that an HSI has to also target low-income students. So, we know Hispanics may be a growing proportion of that, but in fact, as a Hispanic serving institution, that designation benefits all low-income students, and in fact, many of our other students here on campus. So just want to kind of highlight that a little bit. So next slide. Let me just briefly talk a bit about what it means to be an HSI, what the eligibility and certification process was for us. So you must reach that enrollment threshold of 25% Latino full-time equivalency. And so for us, it's a challenge, right? Because we have, many of our students are part-time, right? Some, again, as I mentioned earlier, our transfer students may drop out for a semester and then come back. So we might, as you walk around campus, see a large proportion of Hispanic students here. But when we actually crunch the numbers together and reach that full-time equivalency, that 25%, we finally reached that this last fall. We're at 25.44%. Now, no less than 50% of all the students must be eligible for need-based Title V aid, right? They must be eligible to apply for a Pell Grant. And once we meet that threshold, then we can apply to the Department of Education to receive the designation. Once we get the designation, kind of that stamp of approval, then we can apply for funding. And that's at the stage that we're at now. We applied for several large Department of Education grants this last year, many of them that target sort of digital learning in relation to our Hispanic students. We're cognizant that there's a digital divide there among some members of our student population, but we also recognize that we need to bring them into sort of the 21st century technology to help them become competitive. So let me stop there and then maybe turn it over to Taryn to talk a little bit about what the research says about our Hispanic students and what we can do to respond.
Sure, thank you. All right, so in this portion I'm going to speak a little bit about my research and highlight some programs here on campus that support underrepresented populations. So as Pete mentioned, my focus is on the transitional experiences of Latino students as they enroll in minority-serving institutions, particularly HBCUs and HSIs. And in the past, I've conducted research examining their first-year experience, Latino students' first-year experience and perceptions of sense of belonging on an HBCU, as well as their college choice process and support systems as they transition to college. So primarily during those first 6 weeks, which are very critical. So my focus is on the students' experiences so that we as institutions can understand how to respond to obstacles or challenges that these students confront, particularly in that first year, which then sets the foundation for future academic success. And today I'm going to highlight validation theory. This is a theoretical framework that I've used in prior studies and I think is really important to our conversation today. So validation theory is particularly important for non-traditional students, or what was deemed non-traditional 20 years ago when this theory first emerged. And historically, non-traditional students have been defined as those that are first generation, low income, or may delay or stop out during their college experience. So instead of continuing a family tradition of going to college, they don't have a legacy of college going in their family. They're actually changing the norms in their family by enrolling in higher education. And we're increasingly seeing this profile, the student profile, across the country, but particularly in Texas. And so this theory offers a way to understand their experiences and then also to support their success. So according to Lara Rendon, validation is an enabling, confirming, and supportive process initiated by in and out-of-class agents that foster academic and interpersonal development. So while non-traditional students may enter college with doubts or worries about their ability to be successful, validation comes in to transform that so that they are confident and able to feel like they can be successful in college. And it does that through two types of validation and two types of validating agents. So academic validation encourages students to believe in their ability to learn and to make meaningful contributions to the institution's academic community. These types of validation agents in the classroom are typically faculty members or teaching assistants or peer advisors, and it really comes through when professors create an inclusive learning environment, when they're available for students' questions, when they acknowledge the diversity within the classroom, and they acknowledge the growth and development that they see in students to say, hey, you were not the same student that walked through the door, on the first day of class, and just honoring the work that the students have put into it, the class. The second type is interpersonal validation, which promotes students' personal development and adjustment to college life. So it's not only seeing the student as a student, but recognizing that they have different aspects to their identity. They're a mom, they're working, they're a wife. They have other aspects that need to be addressed within the learning environment. And so both of these should be employed, both of these types of validation should be employed to support the success of underrepresented students. Next slide. All right, so in addition to the two types of validation and validating agents, there are 6 elements to this theory. The first element places the responsibility for initiating contact with students on institutional agents such as faculty, advisors, coaches, lab assistants, and counselors. And then the second element of validation requires institutions to actively seek out students to affirm that they're capable of doing college-level work and being a valuable member of this community. So the onus really resides with the institutional agents to reach out to non-traditional students, identify their needs, and offer assistance. Third, validation is the precursor to student development and involvement, which then promotes persistence. So as students are validated, then they feel more comfortable within this community and can take chances and become involved in other things because they feel like they belong. The fourth element, again, recognizes that they're validating agents within and beyond, so there's faculty members as well as family members, role models, mentors in the community, other folks who can offer words of advice, words of encouragement, and say, you can do this, you do belong here, and you will be successful. Next, validation is an ongoing developmental process that should occur throughout the student's collegiate career, but it is most powerful in the first 6 weeks, that first year as well, just to set the foundation for students' engagement. Since its development, validation theory has been used to examine student engagement, student development, sense of belonging, student self-worth, and their self-image, both quantitatively and qualitatively. Next slide, please. All right, so we see validation in action through our graduate and undergraduate programs here at UTA. For example, our graduate programs offer online courses that provide flexibility through use of technology. In these courses, students can often go at their own pace. We also offer evening and weekend classes for students that are working, so they have more flexibility with their schedule. In my department, in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies, we offer a research day where our doctoral students present their original research to faculty and students. And this provides an opportunity for all of us to gather around as a community, learn what students are working on, and then offer, our words of advice and support. In student affairs, different units are also working on promoting academic and interpersonal validation through mentoring programs, advising. Multicultural affairs has different workshops and sessions to support our LGBTQA students of color, as well as women. And then I've also learned that Doug Gardner is doing some outstanding things in adaptive sports and has won the NASPA Gold Excellence Award for that work. So, in addition to that, we're seeing validation in action through special programs across the country, for example, in California's Puente program, and then the National AVID program, which Dr. Hungerford-Kresser will speak more about in her research presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so we were trying to funnel our panel a little bit to talk more broadly about UTA and then talk about some theory and then talk about my work a little bit more individually. And so that's kind of the way we framed it, and that's why I'm the closer. But first, so my past work is with, you're going to hear a thread here, but it's with first-generation Latino college students. But my work involves the transition to predominantly white institutions. And then through that work, I started looking at sort of troubling the concept of what it means to be college and career ready, and offering this idea that maybe universities should be student ready in addition to students being college ready. And then with colleagues, we looked at some data that said that we really need a definition of college and career readiness that's more nuanced, that accounts more for culture, and really is more complex than simply students being able to arrive at an institution and go through the institution without any sort of remediation. That's basically the definition of college and career ready at this point. One thing through past work that sort of came to the forefront was this idea that a large part of success at the university level involves a metacognitive thread, students being able to understand their own learning, make good choices about what strategies to use in classroom contexts and things like that. So with that as a background, I started my present work. And I think it's important to say that when you study persistence and you study attrition and these sorts of things with first generation or underrepresented students, it's complex and it's large, and I think a lot of times because we aren't necessarily the policy makers at our institutions, it can be difficult to figure out where your voice is, where your work should be placed. And so one of the things I've learned about impact is that my grandmother used to say that we need to bloom where we're planted. And that's kind of what I've done. I'm in the College of Education. I work with pre-service teachers. And so I had to figure out ways to take my work with underrepresented learners and use it in pre-service teacher education, because that's where I work right now. And so I'm wrapping up a 3-year initiative right now with AVID, and Taryn mentioned AVID. It's Advancement via Individual Determination, and they're a college and career readiness nonprofit, basically, that have been around since the 80s. And they have a lot of success with underrepresented students and access to university, to 4-year colleges in particular, as their focus. So I partnered with AVID and then UT Permian Basin and the Meadows Foundation. We wrote a grant to see about doing the college and career readiness piece with pre-service teachers. So we were trying to impact the pipeline, the K-16 pipeline. AVID is very, very big in the elementary, middle, and secondary schools. But we thought, what about teacher education? You know, if we can extend that work, you know, through the entire pipeline and catch teachers before they're going into the classroom, then maybe we have more of a shot at preparing underrepresented students before they get here, and then helping the university to understand what they need to do once the students arrive. And so that got rolling and has been happening. And the way that we've gone about it is that we've looked at pre-service teacher education, but we have elements to the program. So we've been looking at, the focus has been on college and career readiness with an emphasis on culturally responsive pedagogy, English language learners, and intensive strategy instruction, that metacognitive piece that I was talking about. And faculty development is a large piece of our project, and then the K-16 partnership. So we do faculty development alongside pre-service teachers and alongside practicing teachers, so that all 3 of those voices are in the room together, experiencing professional development, you know, talking about pedagogy and those sorts of things. And one of the things that I've heard from faculty most often, because at least the colleagues in my department, we have a heart for underrepresented students. It's why we do what we do. But it's made us more intentional about the choices that we make, about the pedagogy that we choose, about the research lines that we follow. It's given us kind of a common language almost to talk about the things that we're doing and the choices that we make, and being explicit in our strategy instruction. And so with the work that I've done there, we're now so now I'm trying to take it and do almost a kind of a longitudinal ethnographic study, where I'm trying to take everything that I've gathered over the course of the years and use it with my students in sort of reestablishing the teacher education sequence, particularly for English teachers, because I do English teacher education. And so I'm working with, I'm a fellow for 3 years now with the Greater Texas Foundation, and we are, I'm looking at resequencing the activities, the strategies, with everything we've learned from the AVID project with this group of teachers, pre-service teachers, in the hopes that we can center their focus on college and career readiness for all students. That's kind of the title of the project and the idea behind it. And really, I think what intrigued me and intrigues the board, and the reason they're kind of behind such a small scale project, is because of what Maria was talking about, the non-traditional student that we serve at UTA. So here we are talking about college readiness with pre-service teachers who maybe weren't considered college ready when they arrived, or when they started at a junior college, or, you know, we have this non-traditional student that and so those definitions just don't work. They don't work for our students. They don't work for the students they're going to be serving. And so it's time to start challenging those definitions, I feel like. It's time to start moving the work, you know, that way. And UTA is the perfect place to go about it. And so that's why we've all been in conversations about these sorts of things. Pete.
Now we get to turn to the portion where we pick up on some of these themes. Hopefully, as I saw several of you scribbling madly as we were talking, I think there was a lot of learning going on in this room. Before we open it up for questions, I'm going to use my prerogative and ask the first question. I was struck by Maria's slide that showed us as a campus, and some of the numbers that you shared, Maria, about not only our Hispanic student percentages, but some of the others as well. We pulled those numbers for distance education and found out, interestingly enough, of all of our full-time undergraduate online students, we are actually only 18% Hispanic, and we are currently 54% Caucasian, although we're 19% African American. So although we are diverse, we're clearly not as diverse as our student population as a whole, and we're diverse in very different ways. So I had a two-part question. What thoughts do you all have about that, A? And what research questions come to mind based on that, and especially online learners, which I think all three of you mentioned. I'll start with you, Maria.
Okay.
How would you?
I mean, I think online education certainly provides us with a lot of opportunities for serving underserved students. And I want to caution, I think, part of what we say in talking about underserved students as if there's a monolithic group that encompasses that, that defines that group, right? When you talk about particular Hispanic students, you're talking about Hispanic, Latino, Mexican American, or something in between. Do they speak Spanish? Do they not? Are they first generation or not? Do they live at home? There's so many different variables that impact a Hispanic student definition that I think as you look at the data for online education, I would want to break that up and figure out, who are we serving and what are their needs? And can we generalize from that? Part of what I see with some of the freshmen that I interact with is that not all of them have access to internet at home, right? So we sort of assume we want all the students to be on Blackboard. We want them all to use, the technology that I think we're creating here for their benefit. But access to some of them is still a challenge. And we try to, I think, compensate for that by providing facilities here on campus, et cetera. But again, not everybody can get to campus every day. Not everybody can be here all day if you have other responsibilities, right? So thinking about, I think those subgroups within this larger Hispanic group, I think would be something I would be interested in learning more about. Were you going to say something?
Well, I think research question-wise for me, it would be what programs are we offering online and who do they tend to serve? Because not every program that we offer on campus is available online, particularly if you consider undergraduates. So if you think that most of our online education happens with nursing and education, then that might impact some of those numbers as well in ways that we need to recruit in those fields to begin with non-represented populations or non-traditional populations. I mean, it's always been an issue in education. It's something we talk about. I mean, the teaching force is still 85% middle-class white women, right? So, there's that. And so I think maybe the numbers themselves could tell us more if we broke them apart a little better. And as we start offering more digital programs, more online programming, maybe those will shift some as well.
And I would want to know what perceptions some of these groups have about online education. How do Latino families perceive an online course or an online degree versus a, sort of go to campus kind of course, particularly if you're first generation, your family that, sending your kid off to college, but then most of those courses are taking them on a computer. Is that real? I don't know. I think those perceptions are something that we need to explore and identify.
Yeah, and I would be interested in learning more about the students' experiences, and as we disaggregate different populations, if they're coming from a more collectivist family, community, how are they responding to learning independently and having to be self-directed? Also, in what ways are faculty trained in order to promote collaboration online, and what kind of resources are available to them in order to promote that? So kind of systems of support as well as their experiences and what's going to ultimately help them move forward towards degree completion or whatever their goal is.
I was struck by the validation theory definition that you had, too.
goodness.
We spend a lot of time in online course development thinking about course content, how a course is organized, and I was sitting here thinking, have we ever put on our checkbox of required ideas to think about? Is it enabling, confirming, and supportive, which was the core of the definition that Rendon had.
Right. We're going to add something, Peggy?
Yeah, what's something that you said, and it just struck me too, that the community of inquiry model fits well with what you all are doing. This teacher presence, intentionality, like what Holly said, the cognitive presence, which is what they're there for, essentially, and then the social presence, and how those are three, and that's a really robust theory.
Yeah.
It kind of builds on community of practice, but specific to online learning.
Community of
COI. It's
community
really,
of
really well-developed theory. Anyway, and then I'm also interested, like you, in the, you call it validation, I think of it as personalization. And how do you scale that up when you have 400 students in a course and you've got a completely different logistical structure to it, with maybe some intermediary people working? How does one, and I've attempted to do this, but it's tricky, how does one personalize large and scale up large classes?
Yeah. It's a learning process. I mean, this is my first semester teaching one class with over 300 students online. Yeah, you too. So, so I'm learning. I'm working with our coordinator to try to see what I can do, because I don't want students to feel like they're floating out there in the masses, but at the same time, I only have 5 weeks with them. So it is a challenge, and it's something that is, an area for further growth, development, and looking into, because if that's the way that we're trending and we're having more of these classes, then we certainly need to be prepared to best serve these students. Yeah.
And it might be that students are organizing amongst themselves
Right.
in your facility.
Right. Actually, yes, and I did attend the luncheon, the Brown Bag, yesterday with curriculum and instruction, and learned about some strategies. For example, even breaking down the 60 students group to 10 groups of 6. So now you have your small group online to promote more collaboration that way.
A colleague had shared too that in terms of this, sort of this large cohort of online students, that students sometimes find ways of building community. So they might have a Facebook page,
yeah.
right? That maybe the course leader doesn't want, or may not want, because you want all that information to go through Blackboard so you can monitor it. But to me, that was a sign too that these students are looking for community, right?
Yeah.
And Blackboard or whatever mechanism we've set out wasn't quite doing the trick, so we need to maybe reevaluate. It's not that students were rebelling against the structure of the course, but they were trying to find something that responds to their needs.
Right.
And through Facebook, they were also problem solving.
Right.
Students would post, I can't figure out how to get my grade, and somebody would post, okay, here's how you do it, here are the steps. And so again, I think paying attention to what students, the workarounds, I think that some students develop might be a clue for us as to, okay, maybe we need to look at that more closely.
Yeah.
I'll call the gentleman in the back, but also wanted to remind all of our viewers, places far and near, that if you do have a question, you'd like to post it on UTA link, we're checking that hashtag, and we'll be glad to entertain questions via Twitter as well. And I'll turn to the gentleman in the back.
Yeah, David.
Although our campus is very diverse, do you feel like, and this may, Holly may speak to this more, do you feel like we're preparing teachers adequately to teach in an urban setting? Because I can't remember what the percentage is, but I know that a very large percentage of the students that we send out as teachers stay in the DFW area. So do you think we're preparing them to teach a diverse body of students when they get out in the teaching profession?
Let me rephrase the
And
question.
what can you do to improve that?
All right, so for our recording purposes, to rephrase your question. So the question was, is based on the diversity that we have, is UTA preparing teachers to teach in urban areas? Okay, good.
And so Taryn can probably speak to this too because of her ed leadership. And, I would say that yes and no. I think that we don't have students long enough necessarily in our programs, for enough semesters to adequately, I'm sure that nurses would say the same thing, that, you know, we never feel like we've done an adequate job as instructors, I think. But I think that the AVID grant, that was the point. It was, how can we make it more robust while they're here so that they don't lose 3 years when they step out into the world? You know, how can we utilize our urban environment to our, you know, I mean, I went to college in Waco, and there were only so many experiences I could have, right? But here, you know, we have a lot of opportunity. And so I feel like there's more we need to do, and I feel like this work, we need, I don't know, we need to act on what it is that we're learning that students need. And then particularly in online environments, as we train teachers in, you know, online, how are we going to do that and make their experiences very practical? So, I don't know. I don't think we're ever doing enough, but you know, I think we've got to keep doing what we can. You know, you can't. Someone challenged me. I was at a board meeting presenting my work the other day for a foundation, and one of the former presidents of a university who's on the board, he made the comment something about, well, teacher education can never do what you think it can, you know, and I said, but that doesn't mean we should stop going, right? It's still what we do, and it's still,
And so many, there's such high stakes kind of work. But I think, you know, sort of echoing what Holly said, I think being here, we're in a perfect urban laboratory. And so for our students, the experiences that we can offer within, you know, a 30, 40-mile radius, you know, are pretty phenomenal in terms of going someplace, experiencing a classroom that is likely the classroom that they're going to teach, and then coming back and processing that, you know, and providing feedback. I think we do that very well.
I'm not as familiar with K through 12 prep, you know, educating teachers, but I have experience with graduate students in our, you know, master's and doc programs, and folks who want to go into the professoriate. And I think there's certainly areas of improvement, particularly when you get to those graduate level classes, because they become so specialized in doc programs, training about research and how to conduct research, but not necessarily that cultural awareness piece, which is what they'll experience, you know, when they get that first faculty job and who's in the classroom. So certainly areas of improvement and development, and we have to take some of that ownership in making sure we insert diversity and equity issues in every class, regardless of the topic.
Other questions, comments, discussion points? Please, Kim.
I'm interested in validation theory. You can create as a faculty member, especially for the core classes that are large classes, whether they're face-to-face or online, early assignments that are enabling, that do allow them to have community. But the problem also seems to be getting them to engage. And you can do all of the creation on one side, be as supportive, ask them if they need help, but how do we increase the engagement early on in these first few weeks where it's vitally important to do so?
Well, I think one suggestion would be sort of intrusive advising.
You read my mind.
So I certainly do have students that, you know, haven't even checked into Blackboard, you know, the first week, maybe even the second week. So sending the emails, using contact information to make a phone call, and you know, just demonstrating an ethic of care and showing that, you know, you matter, and I notice that you haven't engaged, and that matters to me, is what we can at least try to do, and to say, I'm here for you if you need anything. Please don't hesitate to contact me. So it is challenging because some of the students, well, in my experience, they're in classes or in other programs, so I wouldn't see them in face-to-face anyway, but at least trying, you know, I think is the best attempt.
It's very intimidating, I think, to come to, you know, as a first-generation college goer, I didn't go to office hours until I was a junior in college, because I thought they're going to discover that I shouldn't even be here, right? That it was a
still
fluke.
feel like that.
I know, I still feel like that too, even with tenure. But I think I felt very intimidated. I just thought if I stay under the radar, just kind of do what I'm supposed to do, and you know, I'll be able to get through this, right? Because I didn't have a point of referral, and I think that for our first generation students, it's very difficult. Sometimes any obstacle is a huge obstacle
Right.
because they don't have a point of reference. They don't have somebody that can say, okay, so you flunked that class, let's figure out how you can either take it over or take it over the summer, or what we can do to
Re-strategize.
improve, right?
Right.
I think for some first generation students, that means, okay, I'm dropping out, I can't do this. So I think that the intrusive advising, I think it's a really valid approach, but also I think in terms of thinking about what your work, when you mentioned being student ready, is the institution ready, right? So we need to think differently about our students. We can't think of them as just having, I don't know what you'd call it. We can't expect for them to just walk in when they need help.
Right. Kind of
Because I think it's a different perspective that they bring with them. And again, not all of them. I think that we want to be careful that we don't stereotype, right?
Right.
But what she's saying about engagement, I think, is critical too, because a student who engages early on is not going that for some reason that right that even if you're just going through the motions and you're not, I mean, but it's so hard to get at, and you don't know them well enough initially to really know what, so.
And that's the thing, you have to get to know them though too, because they might be working 40 hours a week.
Right.
They might have family obligations. They might have, but again, I think that we make these assumptions about our students as if, the U.S. News and World Report article, that they're 18-year-old,
Right.
Coming out of high school, that school is the only thing that they do, right? And they're not. They lead very complex lives. So
Right.
how do we find out about them? We get
Right.
to know them.
Well, and what activities are engaging?
Right.
Like what can we do that's going to be hard for someone to remain disengaged, right? When it comes to our pedagogy, when it comes to being strategic, those kinds of questions. And normally, I just don't think as faculty we ask that early on. I think it takes us longer too, especially in our big classes when we're totally overwhelmed and things are happening.
And you have 300 students online.
And tenure track.
And to follow up, Kim, you've thought a lot about that first engaging
Yeah.
assignment. What are some of the thoughts you've been having in
Yes.
the Department of
Yes,
History?
share.
Tell us.
The problem is that you have to get something small that's low stakes, but it has to also be with a group. And it's got to be so low stakes that, but you have to also get people
But it
to
still has to
participate.
matter,
It
right?
has to
It
matter.
has to matter.
Yeah.
It can't matter so
Too
much.
much.
Right.
So
Yeah.
something small, something low stakes,
Kind of test.
hopefully with a group
Low
aspect.
risk, yeah.
So I've tried to institute a small peer learning exercise for something they're all afraid of, which is writing for your first assignment, and letting them work on writing one paragraph together in a small group in a much larger class.
Especially if you're writing in a language that is not your native language.
Right.
And then you
Right.
can have other people, some people know more than others, and then they will start arguing about what should be included, not what to do. But the problem is the ones that won't even participate at that level, to get them to come in and engage. And you can send them emails
Yeah.
saying, we know the deadline is coming, you must engage.
Mhm.
You can give them specifically what they have to do to engage, and they're still not engaging.
The first year experience course, I think, for us, hopefully gets at the engagement issue. It's required of all freshmen, right? It's a 1 credit hour course.
Right.
And trying to get them to engage with a variety of activities on campus. So, and some students have complained about some of the assignments being silly. For example, they have to take a selfie at a sports event on campus, and bring that in as evidence. And that's just to get them to go to something, right? So I think it's a very challenging question. I'm not sure exactly
Yeah.
what the answer is, but again, just as we have a variety of students, maybe there needs to be a variety of approaches,
Right.
right? Yeah, Laura?
I think it's okay to have intrusive teaching. That
Exactly.
that advising variety, where I think sometimes we assume that they know certain things that they
Yes.
don't know.
Right.
And we think it might be embarrassing to have to point some things out to them. Maybe we should.
Yes.
Maybe that's something that we need to consider.
Right.
To say that, you may not know this, I want to share some tips for success.
Yes.
Right.
Put it
A positive.
spin on it.
So that's where that metacognitive pieces come in, Because I'm training pre-service teachers, right? So I'm trying to get them to think about the ways that they learn and the ways that they don't learn and how to make choices, because the research shows that students think they know more than they do, right? That it tends to lean that way, not where they tend to be overconfident in their, in their abilities, and they tend to think the things they bring with them from high school, right?
Yeah.
But as at the university level, we've got to think in terms of, I think we think content and that we don't have time maybe to bring some of that up, to focus on some of those things, but I think in the end it saves you time.
And I would push us also to not expect the faculty member to do it all. I think that we have other students, upperclassmen, we have, we can pull in peers that can also assist in reaching out, in bringing, others in. I think
Which they may be more receptive to than someone saying, you should do this, right?
the Go Centers, Carla Amaro Jimenez's Go Centers, I think are a beautiful example of that, where we had college students going to high schools to serve as, sort of resources for information, but she also found that by being engaged as mentors, the retention rate of those college students, largely Hispanic, went through the roof, right? Because then they felt like they were also of service, they were helping. So thinking about, again, how do we use those students that we have that could be good mentors and links to those that might be, struggling, floundering.
Peggy, you've done a lot of work in online mentoring and personalization of large groups.
I teach all online, so whenever I hear about on campus, I'm like, okay, how does that work online? But so I just wrote down some things I do. I have not done peer-to-peer mentoring, but there's a lot of potential with that through synchronous sessions, either chat or video and audio. And I think we even though students may have different levels of access, there's a lot that can be done with mobile tools. And I think, like Pew Research suggests, 90% and above of students have a smartphone, or access to one, could borrow one, and so. That's controversial, but I would say go with mobile devices as a support tool. Some things I do, I help students learn how to be an online student, and that's even grad students.
You teach us faculty how to be an online student.
The newbies, exactly. We're all at this similar starting place with it. And then I use Blackboard Instant Messenger, which is a built-in tool, and that can also be learner to learner. So they can make an appointment with another student. And have a live chat session. We're in a group, and then I do live sessions to bring students together in real time, and those have been very, very positive and supportive. I've had up to 100 people on, and they love the fact the working parents and the working students. They're 100% working. Love the flexibility of the recording, and so I just said adding flexible digital infrastructure. That's what I would call it.
And I think, sort of to Laurel's question, what Peggy does, because I'm a novice at a lot of the digital sort of education, the tools, but in terms of explaining to students what they think they know that they really don't know, right? Doing a lot of that online in terms of picture grabs, with arrows, click here. I mean, and it might seem real simplistic, but for someone like me that's just learning a lot of these tools, oh my gosh, it saves me so much time because, again, she didn't make the assumption that I already had that kind of knowledge. So, and I think for our students, they could really benefit from some of those. Just walk me, just show me what I need to do and where exactly I need to click. And I'll be on my way. But that first, just getgetting in can be so difficult sometimes and frustrating.
I'll put you on the spot.
Again?
I'll ask you a question about us as a faculty. So I was real intrigued by this idea and also the story you just told about the Facebook page.
Yes.
When I hear that Facebook page, my inner faculty teacher says, loss of control. Where do we stand as a faculty? I know we're moving. We're not where we were 10 years ago. You oversee faculty development on campus. Talk to those ideas a little bit.
Well, I think, as a faculty, we certainly are changing. As a large research institution, we're going through a transition, I think, as many are, right, as we move into a Tier 1, Research 1 institution from a teaching college. So I think we have this mix of, faculty that have been here for some time that maybe are not as familiar with these online tools and with, and they're sort of, they have a knowledge base for how teaching should occur that may be different than what we're trying to propose. But many of them, I think, are really open and are interested in learning, but are like me, right? Show me exactly what I need to do, and then I can jump on that bandwagon. You know, and then we have, I think, a very rich and I mean, they're just brilliant young people that we've brought in as junior faculty that are starting to reflect our student population, which for me is one of our goals. I think our faculty should reflect the community that we serve. And that's difficult because, you know the data for PhDs, with Latino PhDs and African American PhDs that are, on the tenure track, it's not high, and I think we reflect that. So we have a lot of work to do there. But I think in terms of our faculty using online tools, I think they're interested, they're receptive. I think we're all being asked to do more than we ever have been asked to do, and as our population continues to grow, we have classes of 300 students. The time to do sort of professional development around these tools just isn't there. So again, how do we make it easy, accessible?
But we have to stay caught up because like what I keep telling faculty when I've been doing faculty development is the only questions you're asking can be answered by a smartphone.
Right.
You've just made yourself obsolete.
Right.
Like then, it's got to be beyond. We are not the givers of the facts anymore. It's there. It's available. And so, but we didn't learn in that environment. We have not taught in that environment.
And it's so immediate, it's so immediate.
So we've got to figure out a different way to attend to our pedagogy. But in the midst of research and other things too, it gets pushed aside, and then, but at some point it's going to be, you got to stay caught up.
Well, and I think one of my goals, I guess, as a faculty developer, is to identify sort of what challenges and problems faculty have. And then what are the tools that we can use to help them solve that problem? Because I think if it's something immediate, something that they need to address, like how do I teach 300 students online and build community? Okay, I have somebody that can help you do that. And let's match them up and let's figure it out. Rather than presenting, some of these digital tools as an add-on, here's something that you should know because we all should know it. Well, I don't have time for that, right? But I can help you solve this problem with this tool if you just give me 15 minutes or an hour or a couple of days.
I think we have time for at least one or two more questions. We fed everybody lunch in the lunch.
I know.
Please.
To go back to something, Maria, that you said initially.
I think it was Taryn that said it. I think she needs a turn.
Well, anybody can respond.
Same.
Knowledgeable, but I was wondering about the Hispanic serving situation where now we will be applying for grants. How does that figure into this discussion? And what, if any of you can share with us at this point, what does the university think they might do when they write those grants? What are they attempting to do? What are the thoughts out there? I'm just interested.
Well, do you want to start?
Why don't you go ahead?
I think the president has been pretty open about, we have the designation, use it. So, any department, any unit on campus that wants to identify, and again, there's a lot of opportunities, particularly through the federal government, right? Most of the major agencies have set aside money for HSIs. Now, you have to come up with a question, an innovation, something, right, that will form the heart of your proposal to these agencies. But the money is there. So the president's basically opened the door. I mean, clearly we still have to go through grants and contracts and, go through the process here. Don't go independently. And there have been, I think, a number of initiatives that people have submitted. I think Pete's done at least 2.
And I've heard the word complex here quite a bit.
Yes.
I think we think about it operationally, and there's access to grants, but there's also access to, I think, discussions in communities we have not been having on campus. And I think almost overnight we began to have these discussions that really underscored what a complex and changing institution we were. And these are discussions, this panel as proof as well as your questions have really asked us and all to think in more interesting, deep, complex ways about an audience that we may have thought of as monolithic 45 minutes ago and certainly don't anymore.
And it's exciting.
And
It's a good time to be here.
For it.
It's a really good time to be here. And I think it really depends on folks coming together. using Pivot to identify maybe a grant that you'd like to apply for. And I think a lot of the proposals that are out there that have been submitted by units on campus sort of have happened that way.
Yeah.
People identified a grant, call folks together and said, what do you guys think of, let's do something with engineering and nursing, or let's do something with education and it's just been, folks have been coming together and putting forth a variety of proposals. But the field is pretty open right now for any of that to happen. Our challenge, I think, as a university is, we need somebody that will help coordinate a lot of these efforts and sort of serve as a central repository for data on our Hispanic students, so that we don't have to keep asking, for a generation of data every time that we submit a proposal, right? And so I think those conversations are still ongoing. Budgets are tight. But I think I would agree with Holly, it's an exciting time to be here. There's a lot going on. So.
Let me just add to the technology piece when it comes to minority serving institutions. So there's an alliance for equity in higher education that brings together HBCUs, HSIs, and tribal colleges and universities, and they are coming together to advocate for more technology needs under Title III and Title V, so that they can have more support for technology maintenance and enhancement. So there will be additional technology grants to support these institutions.
And I would encourage you to go to HACU, HACU.net, which is a Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities. And they're sort of been, a good tool for us, a good resource for us in terms of navigating this process of becoming an HSI. And actually the president will be out there this month, to receive an award from HACU, sort of recognizing, us as an emerging HSI. So, so we're just making inroads and making connections. But again, I think the field is wide open for people to take advantage of that designation.
Well, I can certainly see everybody in the room has a page or several of scribbled notes. I know it's been a very information-filled hour. Before I thank them, I'm going to put them on the hook once more. We've talked about everything from theory to practice to philosophy to engaging more complex views of our world. If there was one thing you'd suggest each of us that we need to attend to, that we walk away from this session thinking more about today, here's your chance to send us all off with a quick and pithy charge.
You're cruel, Pete. You're cruel. Okay.
I think to reflect on the diversity that we have on this campus in a more nuanced way, not just by race and ethnicity categories, and to think about how we can all use technology either independently or collaboratively to support the diverse representation we have on campus.
Thank you.
I think for me it would be two words: assumptions and connections. That, we're sort of careful with the assumptions that we make about our students, whether Hispanic or not. Because I think, again, as I interact with them individually, I'm constantly surprised by them, that by their perseverance, by the challenges they face, by their commitment to getting a degree. So sort of checking the assumptions by making some connections, by, get involved with the student group. Those of you that are faculty, I know it's so hard because you have 300 students in a class, but, sort of investing in one student, sort of getting to know their story, I think will kind of maybe open up some doors for other possibilities.
Holly, you get the last word.
No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure.
I would say that being here, this has been, I've been on the tenure track here. This has been my career move post-graduate school, right?
She just got tenure, for anybody that doesn't know.
Yay! But, and so I felt very supported. I feel like with research and, that whole thread that runs through this campus and the push for Tier 1. But I think what I've been most excited about through the work I've done the last few years is seeing faculty get excited about pedagogy, about teaching, and, and staff too. I mean, just, thinking about students as individuals, but more than that, just not being afraid to adjust what we're doing and to talk about it, right? Like, it's been, and so for